Hello and welcome to Bickington Photographic Club's YouTube tutorials channel. Today we're going to introduce you to Adobe Photoshop CC, and that's this icon here. Many of you will have seen it before. Sister program to Lightroom and Bridge and many others in the Adobe range. We are going to give you an overview of Photoshop's Workspace today. So we're going to go ahead first of all and open the software. If you're new to Photoshop, when you open it, it will obviously be completely empty here, whereas obviously we've got some images that have been opened previously. So this is the screen you'll see when you open Photoshop if you're opening it standalone. That is to say that you're not opening it from Lightroom, which, if you look at my cursor on the left, is an option. You can access images that are in Lightroom from your Photoshop. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick an image, and what happens with Photoshop that's different to Lightroom is, first thing that happens is that it opens a piece of software called Camera Raw. This piece of software is built into Lightroom, which is why you'll recognise a lot of these sliders, but it gives you an opportunity to make some subtle tweaks to the image before actually bringing it into the Photoshop workspace. You've got your histogram, your temperature, exposure, contrast, highlights, all very, very similar to what you see in Lightroom. We're going to leave those alone for the moment because you've worked a little bit on those possibly in the Lightroom stuff, and we're going to bring the image into the Photoshop workspace. And there we are. So this is the Photoshop workspace. You can see, much like Lightroom and other Adobe programs, you've got very, very similar tab names up the top with your file, edit, image, etc. You've got the title of the image that you're working on, which is open in this window here. Your tools are all down the left hand side, and we'll come back to those shortly and go through a couple of them. And on the right hand side is the bit that really stands Photoshop apart from other editing programs, in that you've got your layers and your adjustments and your masks, and many other more sophisticated tools to really manipulate a photograph or combination of photographs, as you'll see later on. So focusing on the left hand side, we've got a number of tools, and conveniently I don't actually have to show you what they do, because Photoshop very kindly has this little screen pop up for you which tells you that the move tool in this case moves things around. And if I come across to the rectangular marquee tool, you can see that what we mean by marquee is essentially a set of marching ants, as we call them, which is a dotted line around an area, and you can select what area you're choosing. Similar, the lasso tool allows you to choose a selected area freehand, which is quite useful. Again, it works on the marching ants principle, as you can see from that close up there. And also the quick selection tool. Now, a quick selection tool is very, very useful, and you'll see when we get to using that. Of these three selective tools, it gives you the most variety in what you can do with it, and precision on selection, etc. Moving on down, we've got a simple crop tool, and as you'd expect, it's a crop tool that is used for cropping your image to ratios or freehand, so you can unlock the ratios, so you can do letterbox cropping, etc. It's all in that menu there. Quite often with a lot of these tools, if you right click, you'll get a little sub menu which gives you additional tools within the tool, and we'll go into exactly how they work in a little bit more detail as these tutorials progress. We've got our eyedropper tool, which is very useful for selecting colours that are in your image, so that you can either use them somewhere else or add them to your colour swatches so that you've got them for future use. Very good when you're editing pictures to try and maybe increase a border or something like that, or you want to alter the colour of a flower or the sky or whatever. It's got many uses. Then we come into a series of tools which are effectively used for getting rid of unwanted blemishes, marks. Could be sensor spots, it could be unwanted person in the photograph, it could be that you've discovered that you've taken a lovely picture of your partner, but you've got a lamppost growing out the top of their head and it doesn't look right. So you can use a combination of these tools to actually put that photo right and make it a usable image, rather than what a lot of us would have done without this piece of software, is just go, oh, that's a shame, and bin it. Continuing down, the clone stamp is very similar to our patch removal tools. It's very good at covering up areas, or can be used to increase an image. So if you want to make an image slightly wider or slightly taller, you can increase the canvas size and then simply use the clone stamp tool and introduce additional parts to your canvas to increase it. Paintbrushes. There are umpteen million paintbrushes to choose from, whether it's a brush or whether it's a pencil. There are loads of them, and you'll notice all the while we're using these tools down the side, there's a whole host of options for the tools that come along this top line as well. With the paintbrush tool, you can obviously select the hardness and the size. You can select different types of brush, whether they're special effects, whether they're dry or wet. You can even create custom brushes to represent different shapes or patterns that you want to incorporate into a picture. You'll be taught all of this as we go along in future sessions. Graduated filters. Much like we use in Lightroom, you can create a gradient or a filter, and you can do it from point, you can do it from side to side, top to bottom, just as the screen is showing you here. The tools go on down. I would recommend that in order to learn these tools, the easiest thing to do is to grab one and play with it. It speaks for itself in many cases. You can see there, and our zoom tool, that's one that we do use quite a lot, and our color palette, our swatches. You can set foreground and background color. This little tab here will always default back to black and white, or whatever the default colors are you have set up, and obviously simply clicking on it allows you to pick just about any color you could possibly imagine, and gives you the option to add it to your swatches, etc. And yeah, very useful tool again, as you'll find out later on. So they're the main tools within Photoshop. One thing we should point out here is our window setup. Photoshop, when you open it for the first time, has many different workspaces to choose from. If it is your first time opening the software, it will be set to Essentials. You can see there that that's the default. We've switched our workspace to Photography, which essentially gives us all of the tools and sort of more sophisticated options which are most likely to be relevant to manipulating a photograph, rather than sort of graphics design tools or web-based tools, which you can obviously see as different options here. So set yourself up in a photography workspace, and that will give you a very similar looking screen to this one, and from there you can get creative. That's the Photoshop workspace in a nutshell. Watch future Photoshop tutorials to learn more about the tools and how to use them, and eventually we'll build up that tutorial database, and you can learn about layers and blending, masks, filters, and much more. This is Bickington Photographic Club's YouTube tutorial channel. This is Photoshop number 1. Hope you've enjoyed watching and looking forward to learn some more with us. We'll catch you soon.